Welcome to Dirty Daytini. I'm your host, Christina Kane. This is the unfiltered podcast that takes you through the dirty truth of dating, modern romance, relationships, and most importantly, self-discovery. Remember, love isn't always neat, and sometimes life is on the rocks, but it's sure worth the mess. Welcome to Dirty Daytini. I'm your host, Christina Kane. Joining us on the podcast today is the remarkable Terrinee Gundy, a mom, sister, aunt, friend, lawyer, and judge, whose journey from the challenges of her father's addiction in Jacksonville, Florida, to becoming her family's first college graduate and a distinguished legal professional. She's nothing short of inspiring. Her commitment to education, community service, and her recent book, The Daughter of a Junkie, A True Love Story, provides a powerful narrative of the resilience and triumph. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm very excited to talk with you. I have a bunch of questions for you, so I'm very grateful that you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. I am grateful for you inviting me. Little West Coast, East Coast love.
Totally. It absolutely is that. Yeah, so I was in Atlanta and I saw your billboard for your book, and I just figured, that you would probably have a lot of insight and inspirational perspectives on just navigating relationships and how your upbringing can kind of affect your viewpoint on love and life, because, nurture versus nature plays such a role in our upbringing. So the first question I just kind of want to dive into is, growing up with a father who was a junkie and addicted to crack cocaine, how did his addiction shape your perspective on life and relationships?
I think that the first thing I need to address is that my father and I have always been extremely close. So I am a daddy's little girl. Uh-huh. So even throughout his addiction, he has been an amazing father. And so growing up as a child, I was just totally, completely, utterly obsessed with him. I followed him everywhere. I went with him everywhere. And so for me, I guess, even though you say growing up with an addiction, and he very well had an addiction, I still had a very traditional daddy-daughter relationship with my father. And I know that this is unusual because you hear about addicts and their families, and you hear about abandonment, you hear about abuse,
neglection.
And I'm sure that some people will look at some of the things that I discuss in the book as neglect. And by sure, it was neglect in some form. But at the time, I didn't feel neglected. Mm-hmm. So looking back, thinking about it, my own children, I have two teenagers, a senior in high school, a junior in high school. And looking back when I was writing, I was like, oh my God, putting my kids in my shoes and my sister's shoes. And it kind of was like really sinking in for me. Like, oh, this was kind of a little weird and crazy. But as a child, I had no idea. So I never felt neglected. And I was never physically abused. I was never sexually abused by my parents or any of their friends or anything like that. So I did not have the traditional story that you think of when you think of addicts.
Right.
And so I say that to say that the first man that I fell in love with was my father, which I think really helped me have a very secure sense about my worth and value at a very early age. And it also made me really appreciate men. And I mean, most of my experience growing up was with Black men. Mm-hmm. It really made me appreciate, that you don't have to be perfect to still be a good person.
Right. That's so interesting because, I feel like most people who come from a household where addiction exists, there is that neglect, abuse, you don't really have the best viewpoint of your father. And then that therefore crosses over to how you perceive men and your trust with men and your relationships that you build with the different men and relationships you encounter. So you're saying that it was actually he was an addict, but I guess they call it a functioning addict in a way. Like he was still very much involved in your life and your relationships and, really showed you a good father role.
Well, okay, so in our family, we don't use functioning addict.
Okay.
My father, who is the actual addict, does not use that. He does not believe in that terminology. I know that it is very widely used across, I guess the world of recovery. My father does not use that. So, because he believes that he is either functioning as a man, as a father, as a son, or he is not functioning at all when he is on drugs.
Right.
He just, I guess, I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, or just really wanting to remain my sister and I's hero. He disappeared when he was high. So he had the wherewithal to make sure that we never actually saw him put a pipe to his mouth.
Right.
I really think that had a huge impact on the way that we viewed him. So he never really fell off this pedestal as of being our hero as little girls.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that had a lot to do with it. I also think that, as weird as it may sound, even though he would disappear, sometimes for days or so, we had a sense of security, one, that he always loved us. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have felt unconditionally loved every day of every hour of every minute of our lives from my mom and my dad.
That's beautiful.
Agreed. I mean, I think my sister and I have come to the conclusion that it's the only reason that we're not batshit crazy, because we have never not felt loved. But also, I think that for anything that really mattered, the things that you remember as a kid. So like graduations or my sister's cotillion. I was in, so many pageants, dozens of pageants, going off to college. For anything that was significant, my father was there. Mm-hmm. And so I think it kind of overwhelms or overshadows when he comes up short. Because the memories that you remember the most, he was there.
Right.
So I think that also helped, because anything that, I felt very proud of growing up, my father was right there.
Yeah, which I would say that even some households and families where there is zero addiction, a lot of people cannot even say that their mom or their father has been there for those important milestones in their lives.
I agree so much. I just remember having a conversation when you said that with my father when I was a teenager. And so, my father was a pretty successful entrepreneur, even though he would use a lot of the money to go and get high. He also had a group of friends who were also successful entrepreneurs. And we would have conversations a lot growing up about them, one, not having the same kind of relationship with their children, not being as close. And we all got emotional even as an adult. We were in Florida for my daughter's 14th birthday. And one of his friends came over. He wanted to see us. He hadn't seen us in years. And it really touched me because he just broke down crying, because he hasn't spoken to his children, and he doesn't have the same issues or the plight that my father went through. Right. And he was just saying that, regardless of what goes on, it's just amazing that we have been able to maintain such a close bond, that my daddy has been able to maintain such a close bond with all of his children.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's extremely rare and profound, because, My parents were not like addicts, but I mean, there's definitely big things in my life that my father wasn't always there for. So it sounds like regardless of like his battles and struggles that he encountered, like he still showed up and was the best dad to you and your sister.
Yes,
So so
absolutely.
so how did you, since he like when he would use, which is great that he would like go away and not let you guys see him in that perspective, how did you discover that he was addicted? Was that through his mom, through your mom? Was that, how did that like first discovery happen for you?
I think again, so in the book, I call us the core four: my sister,
Mm-hmm.
my mom, my dad, and I. And so the core four, we didn't have any secrets. So it wasn't really like he was trying to hide it or my mom was trying to hide it. We had a thing where everything that was going on in our lives, we were going to find out in our home from each other. No one outside of the core four was going to be able to tell us something about the other one. So we had this really exceptionally tight bond. And my parents didn't lie to us.
Yeah.
And in return, as children, believe it or not, we did not lie to them. So I never, and I'm grateful for that. I even worked hard with my own children to be able to have that connection, because as you grow up, you want to protect them, and sometimes you can be overbearing, and sometimes that can push children away to feel like you don't understand or you can't relate or you're going to be upset.
Mm-hmm.
I was really grateful that I've never felt that way. So there was nothing I was ever afraid or fearful to tell my parents. Like, I always knew no matter what it was, they were going to help me figure it out, but they were also going to stand by me, right, wrong, or indifferent. It didn't matter. The only thing that really mattered was that I was their kid. That's all they cared about. And so I think that that gave me, again, this security that I am talking about, like in all of my relationships with my family, my relationships with my friends, and of course, intimate relationships. But I think one of the things that happens when, yes, he would go off, and thank God. I mean, it's one of our worst nightmares to actually see him.
Mm-hmm.
It's the if I leave this earth without seeing that, I will be happy.
Right.
But it also, I think, in these relationships that I've mentioned, family, friendships, and intimate, I think that it developed two things that are really prevalent that could be good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
One, it made us very adaptable. So there were not really many people who would be in my life or my sister's life, and leave that we would care about.
Mm.
We were able to adjust very easily. And you could be important to us, and we could really care about you. But when you have a parent that disappears and comes back, it gives you a numbness and a sense of reality that you just have to deal with what's in front of you for the day.
Right.
And so when you're in a relationship or a friendship, that could be really good for your mental health, but it also could be really bad for your relationship or your friendship, because it sends the wrong message that you don't care.
Right.
And unfortunately, my sister and I have a really hard time adjusting, like trying to convince you that we care in those types of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the second thing is that you kind of really just almost expect disappointment.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that is good again with dealing with reality.
Yeah.
But it's really bad when you are trying to build a friendship and a relationship and you're waiting for the other foot to drop.
Right.
Because it means that you're not 100% vulnerable. It means that you're not letting that person completely in. You still have up some kind of wall, even if you look like you are vulnerable and you look like you're close. The other person, I think in my history, I could always tell there's something that they couldn't quite put their finger on.
Mm-hmm.
But because, my father has been fighting this battle since 1978, you just said it's nature versus nurture.
Right.
It was a part of my environment. It is just, the same way I learned how to read. It's a way that I learned to deal with people.
Right.
And so it's really hard. I'm not even sometimes conscious of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, like, does the coming and going of individuals in your life and being open and accepting to letting who comes come and who goes goes, and almost expecting disappointment from people, do you feel like that has been positive for your mental health because you don't have any 100% attachments to anything, you're very just free flowing in life? Or do you feel like that has prohibited you from creating deeper connections with others?
I would say both. It just really depends on the situation and the person. So there are probably some people that come and go that I could have had a deeper connection with, and I simply didn't because I had walls up.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who I was able to have a deeper connection with because really they tolerated my insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to push through. So they were able to actually, I guess, keep showing up in a way where they would finally get me to completely open up. But
Right.
that is rare and few in between.
Oh, I know. It's hard to find people these days that can even commit to grabbing a cup of coffee, yet alone like committing to show up for you and show that they care for you. So when you do find that and you show those people that persevere through the walls that you have up, it's like those are the people that really care and want to be there.
And I won't even go that far. I'm not going to even say the other people don't care. To be honest, I'm not blaming anyone. Like, I think a lot of it is, again, just accepting reality. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just that you have a really good grasp on, or I should say, that some things work out, some things don't.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be anyone's fault.
You're speaking my language. I say this all the time. I say this all the time to people that, people in relationships and friendships and family, you either grow together or you grow apart, and it's no one's fault. And that's okay that happens because all of us as individuals on our own are constantly evolving and growing and going through different experiences and encounters that are shaping us. And the people in our life may not be going through those same things. So we may outgrow one another, and that is totally fine because I see a lot of people outgrow their relationships regardless of what type of relationship it is. And instead of just being open and accepting and like appreciating for that time that they did spend in your life,
Exactly.
they hold on so tightly to what it was or what it could be. And sometimes you just have to let relationships be free flowing.
Yeah, I agree. In all avenues.
Right. So it actually sounds like you had a great relationship with your father and your family and the core four. So with actually having a great relationship with your father and learning a lot of values and, patience and expectations and all of these different characteristics that you learn in childhood, did it any way affect positively or negatively the way you perceive and trust men and the perception that you had on yourself, whether that be negative or positive?
I guess I never really thought of it that way. I'm not gonna say I think the framing of it for me may be a little too absolute.
Mm-hmm.
So, Negatively, not necessarily, or positively. Like, I guess I just wouldn't frame it that way.
Okay.
I think that it's kind of more what you just said. Like, it's like we have life experiences. We go through life with people, and some things we enjoy experiencing with that person because they were the right person, and some things we didn't because they weren't the right person, not necessarily because they were a bad person, but they weren't the right person at that time, maybe.
Yeah,
And
for
so,
sure.
for me, again, I think that with my father, in any relationship, the one thing I know for sure is that I know how to love a man.
I really love to hear that.
So
I do. I love to hear that because I mean, my parents are divorced, and when that divorce happened, it really affected my relationship with men for quite some time. So it's really beautiful and refreshing to hear that throughout your battles and struggles, you know how to love a man.
yeah, I for some reason my parents got divorced as well when I was 13, and the divorce was hard, but it did not impact me that way.
Mm-hmm.
It impacted more because, the core four was breaking up, and the core four was just such a bedrock of my life. And so, but no, it didn't affect me that way. I've always felt like I know how to love a man because of my father. And, sometimes my sister makes a joke. She was like, maybe we love them too hard because sometimes it seems like they take our love for granted. Because when you love somebody who goes through the ebbs and flows of addiction, you put up with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, that was unconditional love. So we only know one kind of love, which is unconditional. And unfortunately, some people don't know how to receive unconditional love, and they also do not know how to return unconditional love. So I would say that probably not a negative, but just again, the reality of relationships, people's own experiences kind of shape who they are. And so because my sister and I only know one kind of love, we don't do any love half measures.
Right.
No one has ever loved us by half. We've been unconditionally loved by everyone. My mother, my father, my grandmother, my aunts. I mean, my uncles, my cousins, each other. And so I think that is one thing that we really do have to deal with in relationships. Sometimes people do not know how to receive unconditional love and certainly don't know how to return it.
Right. Do you feel like, because I feel like I've seen this with a lot of people who have come to me with, relationship struggles. Do you feel like with unconditional love, when giving someone unconditional love, there can be a time where, especially if it's taken for granted or not appreciated, that you're almost limiting and lowering your boundaries because someone keeps taking it for granted, but you keep giving. So therefore it's like you start to lose your self-respect and your boundaries a bit. Does that quite like kind of make sense? Like you love so much, no matter pros or cons, but then people take it for granted.
Um, in my experience, what I say and what I live by is that I never let you and your values change who I am in my values. So I love you unconditionally. I do everything I can possibly do in my power. And once I have done that, then I feel free to walk away. So for me, there isn't really like I'm lowering my standards or I'm compromising. I mean, I have some, again, things that, bars, ceilings, however you want to phrase it, that I'm never going to do. But what is my guiding light and what I stay centered in is whatever I believe in is what I do. It doesn't matter what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I cannot control you. And I guess this sounds like that this shows you again how many Narcotics Anonymous meetings I have been in.
Right.
Yeah, because I'm very aware and keen on I can only control me. I
Yeah.
cannot control what you are going to do. And so I have always let my own value system guide me, which means I've never felt bad about loving anyone unconditionally because
Yeah.
I am doing what I feel comfortable doing. Now, you may think that's too much.
Right.
My friends may think that's too much. Some of my family members may think that's too much. But the rule that I use is what I believe. And once I have given everything I have in me and there's not a change, I feel totally free and comfortable about what I've done and the decisions I've made.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have your, limitations and boundaries within yourself, and you're willing to give all of that. But because, yeah, there's just been, I feel like people will be, whether it's a toxic relationship, whether it's abusive relationship, people will be like, well, I unconditionally love them. And there's a fine line between unconditionally loving someone and knowing when, you've done your part and it's time to gracefully let go.
I agree. I totally 100% agree. So, yeah, and let me just say clear up for the record. I don't believe in staying unconditionally loving someone in an abusive relationship, in a toxic relationship. Um, I do not have, me personally, I do not have the wherewithal um, or the bandwidth for another addict. So
Mm-hmm.
those are some of the kind of no goes for me off the start
Right.
because everything that I had in me to help someone with their sobriety, I've given to my father. And so I'm just really honest with myself and anyone else. Again, no judgment. Everybody has their own journey. I can't go on that journey with you though, because I don't have the capacity for that.
Yeah.
You need to find someone else who can go on that journey with you. I'm not going to be the person.
Or it's kind of, in a way, their own journey to discover and overcome. Because, a lot of your family, your boyfriend, your sister, your dog, everyone could want the best for you, whether you're not an addict or if you are an addict, they can want this for you, but you have to really want it for yourself.
Agreed. Yes. Sobriety is a choice
Right. So,
that
do
only
you,
the addict can make.
what was that?
That only the addict can make.
Yeah, I agree. So, with all the help and that you gave your father, did you growing up enter any, intimate relationships, boyfriend and girlfriend, with people who struggled with, alcohol or addiction, or you kind of had more of a different, like you were like, I did it with my dad. Now I want like a different path.
Absolutely. Again, I didn't have the capacity for that. I've
Mm-hmm.
never had the capacity to tolerate that. And so I have never done drugs in my life. And not even in just intimate relationships and friendships. I don't
Yeah.
hang out with people who do drugs. Again, this is not any judgment. It's just that I don't have the mental capacity for that. And
Mm-hmm.
I needed to protect myself. And so for me, I don't knowingly know anyone that I've been in a relationship with that was actually participating in drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that if they were, almost positive that I would have known
Right. Right.
because
You have experience.
I have so much experience with recognizing when someone is actually using. And so yeah, that's just not something that was going to be in the cards for me. I had given
Yeah.
all I had to my daddy, and so I didn't have that for a relationship. I didn't have the
Yeah.
tolerance for that.
Well, I personally want to commend you for that, because it seems like throughout this whole experience, instead of you, maybe attracting a certain type of man or letting a man, like a man and your viewpoint on him, affect like who you are, it seems like, if anything, like this experience has completely turned you in to a very self-respecting, boundary-driven, confident, positive woman.
Oh, thank you. And you really should commend my parents, because I think that my mom and my dad, despite their challenges, did a really good job. And I guess the word would be kind of planting the seeds, or really imposing their will of making sure that they were going to be raising self-respecting, confident, respectable little girls. And so I do commend them on that, because they had standards, they had rules for us, they had things that they did not play about. And because we loved and respected them so much,
I'm like
we
getting
listened.
emotional.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. Don't mind me. I love this.
Yeah.
No, I think
You
that's great.
that we
Um,
really did.
so, what, because you've accomplished so much, you were the first person, to go to college, you're a judge, you're a lawyer. So, what kept
Well,
you
both of my
motivated?
parents went to college. They didn't graduate. They actually met in college in your hometown of Savannah, at Savannah State.
Oh my God. Isn't that so funny how it's just like full circle? Like I saw your
Yeah.
billboard in Atlanta, then I'm from Savannah. They went to school in Savannah. I mean, it's just really a full 360 moment. But what kept you so motivated in defying the odds despite like all the challenges you faced in this dynamic upbringing?
So I've been referencing her, my sister, but I'll introduce her
Yeah.
to you in the audience. Her name is Mia Michelle. My daughter is named Mia Michelle after my sister. And there is a chapter in my book called Mia Michelle Gundy. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, as a young girl, it's something else my parents put in us. They made sure that we loved each other more than we loved them. They
Mm-hmm.
gave me a duty, a responsibility to take care of her. And I took that seriously. And it was an honor for me and a privilege. At the time growing up, I thought that my purpose in life was to be her big sister. And so for me, she guided every part of my young life, because I wanted to wake up and be better than the person I was yesterday for her. I wanted to be the best example I could be for her. And I wanted to get both of us out of the ghetto. And I was hell bent on doing that. And so I never lost sight of that. She was my guiding light. She was my center. She is definitely the reason that I am sitting here talking to you right now. I would not have made it without her.
Have you ever had like an interviewer get so emotional? Like your story is just like so emotional to me. I'm like, it's really striking a nerve. I'm fine.
Yes, and I am trying my best not to get emotional, watching you get emotional,
I
because
know this has never happened to me, but also it's like, some people's, I don't know, it's just never happened. But I'm like over here, like getting all emotional. I mean, it's really, really inspiring. Um,
thank you.
so for those that you feel are involved with someone, whether it be a parent, a romantic relationship, whatever it be, who struggles with addiction, and also whether it be, someone who's more of a toxic addiction or someone who's more, still a great person and a great boyfriend or a great husband or whatnot. What advice do you feel like you can give to others in a similar circumstance on how to love someone and be there for them, but not lose yourself in the process?
Um, someone else asked me that question like sometime last year, a similar question. And for me, it's really hard for me to say, because as you asked me before, if I'm being honest, I've never been in that situation. I've
Yeah.
never allowed for myself to be put in that situation. And so my initial answer would be run. I mean, like avoid it at all costs.
Right. You see the signs, be out.
Yes, like exit left. Um, so that is the tyranny, the inner child in me. And so that is really geared and tailored specifically for me. But when I answer that and I think about it a little bit more universal, I think that the only advice that you can give someone else is to truly do what is best for them. And I feel like that is, again, an individual choice that no one can decide or figure out except that person. Because I have seen relationships make it through addiction. I've seen relationships get stronger through addiction. I have seen relationships break up during addiction. I have seen one addict turn out another addict. I've seen one person who isn't an addict pull the other person back to the light. There are so many circumstances, and because life is just really about two individuals in a relationship, it's really hard to define what that looks like for someone else. So I think that if you always choose you first and make your decisions based on what you believe is right for you, then I think you'll lead yourself to the right place. Because again, you may not have the same story or background as me. You may have the capacity and the strength to really change a person's life in that perspective or to help them along the way. Or you may be just like me and you should probably run.
Abort mission at all cost.
At all costs. But again, no one can answer that other than the individual. So
Right.
I just think that as long as you put yourself first, because that is what I did, right? I put tyranny first. So tyranny knows she does not have the capacity to deal with an addict that isn't her father, which means I cannot date you. We cannot be friends. I don't have that because I chose to put me first. But if you're saying, hey, no, I think I can help this person. I can see past their addiction and I can see a way to get to them. And that is what I need for my own heart. Then that works for that person. So for me, it always starts and ends with what you need.
Right. And I think that what you just said and how you said it is what people really need to hear. It's what's best for you, not what's best for them. What is best for you at the end of the day.
Yep. But only you can decide that.
Yeah. What, so with those who are reading your book, are going to pick up your book and read it, have read it, when you wrote this book, what message did you really hope readers take away from this story?
So for me, that's kind of a twofold answer. I really wrote this book initially for my family. I wanted, one, for my kids to know my story. I say this thing where I'm the daughter of a junkie, but my daughter is the daughter of a judge. And so we have two completely different life stories. She will never truly understand my life. I will never truly understand her life because we just have, they're just so stark differences.
Contrasted, yeah.
Yes. But I wanted, one, for them to know our story. I wanted them to understand our story, and I wanted them to still have respect for it. Because even though it's very different, but for what I went through, but for that community, that ghetto, those people who helped me, there would be nothing for you. Your life would not be so vastly different. And I need for you to have humility and gratitude and respect for that. And so my children started this journey. And I also wanted to honor my family. I mean, it's called The Daughter of a Junkie, a true love story. Here's the book. But it's a love story, not just about me and my dad, me and my mom, me and my sister, me and the core four, but my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles. It's really talking about how all of these people poured into me. It was almost like I had no choice but to do something with my life. I had too many people rooting for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to tell them not only thank you, but that I wouldn't have made it without them, and that I love them unconditionally. And I am so proud to be from them. But I think that as I got more and more into it, I dedicated the book to other sons and daughters of addicts. Because prior to writing the book and really having discussions with people, I didn't have a real understanding of how many families, addicts and their families and their children, suffer in silence. Because we have been made to believe we should be ashamed of our stories or ashamed of our families who are addicts. Again, my sister and I, very different again in this aspect. We have always been very proud of our family. We've always been very honest. If you know me, you know that I am the daughter of a junkie. That's where the title came from. I've been calling myself that since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And I would tell anybody who knew me, because I was not going to let someone make me ashamed of my family. But again, I didn't understand that so many people, so many families had not had that luxury. And there were many counterparts who are in my age range and younger or older who are still dealing with the inner child in them who is actually ashamed of their story or their addict family member. And I just wanted them to feel free. And I wanted them to know that they had nothing to be ashamed of, and that I was going to stand in the light for all of us, because I understand that you may not be ready, and I mean the universal you, but that I felt like, I had the strength to carry this burden for all of us, to tell everyone that not only should we not be ashamed, that we would no longer suffer in silence and darkness.
Wow. I love that. Well, we are coming to an end, and I have one last final question for you. Before the final question, is there anything additionally that you would like to add or share?
The only thing I would like to say is that I really appreciate you for sharing my voice, for sharing my story based on what I just shared. I think that it is very commendable and courageous for you not only to have this podcast and really be talking about one of the, if not the most important thing between humans, is relationships. Because we seem to be in a world where we forget that we've really only created to interact with one another and to procreate. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate you having a podcast about that. But also, I just think you should be commended for inviting me to talk about a subject matter that people avoid and how it relates to relationships.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for seeing addicts. Thank you for seeing other children of addicts in our families.
No, thank you for coming on. I mean, I definitely had some tears forecasted this morning. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It really means a lot, and it was very touching to me. And I know that a lot of people throughout the world listening, whether you have a parent with addiction in your family or not, like, you can learn a lot from your story and your experiences and your outlook on your childhood and who you are today. So I really appreciate you sharing that. It's relatable to all people in different walks of life. My final question is, what is one poor decision that you feel you have made in love or life, but it ultimately ended up being a very positive lesson for you?
So I have this thing where I have a really hard time not being direct and honest. But I'm going to I don't want to be hurtful either.
To me?
No, to my
Oh,
past.
okay. Yeah. I mean, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I just like to ask that question because, we've all made mistakes and we all learn from our mistakes. So I don't know if there's one that really sticks out to you that, you feel at the time or looking back, you were like, wasn't that great? But I actually am grateful for that because I learned these lessons.
For me, I think the biggest mistake I made was believing that you could have a totally fulfilling relationship without love. So again, my background will make me put up walls in a way where you can only get so far with me, which also meant that I was never going to experience true love in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But a younger me believed that was okay and normal. And I think I regret it because it's not. I grew up in a house full of love. And I felt like it was a disservice for my own children not to feel the same thing. And so that, I think, was my biggest regret. But it worked out.
Yeah.
Because the lesson I learned was that that's not what I want. And that I needed to go out and find and get exactly what I needed and wanted for me and my family.
Right. You recognized the issue and you took the steps to fix that about yourself.
I did.
Well, I love that for you. I think that's great. I think a lot of people have gone through a similar experience like that. Like, I mean, even my parents' divorce, like, for a really long time, I was stone cold, showed no emotion. I was not open and accepting to any man, guy, whatever's love towards me. And I was very like stay away, but also like come here a little bit. And I realized, like, one day, no one else made me realize this, but I realized one day, I was like, this is not a way to live life. Like, just shut off, cold and emotionless. Like, so I ended up going to therapy and I worked on myself. And now you can see I have no problem showing emotion because here I am crying. That was
But
really
you were a lot more involved than I was. I didn't make it to therapy. My sister and I were each other's therapists. I think
yeah.
that we would just talk things out. I literally had an epiphany. Like, this is not what I want, you know? Like, I grew
Yeah.
up seeing what real love feels like, looks like. And to be honest, it wasn't a priority for me because, like told you again, I was so focused on my career and getting out of the ghetto and changing the trajectory of my sister and I's lives that relationships and things like that kind of took a back seat for a long time. And so by the time I realized that, no, I need more.
Yeah.
It was a little bit too late for that situation, but it was not too late for me.
There you go. Yeah, I think, I mean, just like with anything, though, whether it's, you know, you have a problem letting people in, whether you're a narcissist, whether you're a addict, whatever the issue be at hand, the first step in all cases is you accepting you have that problem. And, you know, yeah, other people can say, oh, you're a narcissist, or, oh, maybe you have addiction problem, or why don't you let me in? Other people can say that, but it takes you being like, okay, it's me. I'm the problem. What can I do to overcome this? If you want to overcome it, some don't. And that's, you know, each their own journey.
Agreed. Here.
Here. Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for joining us today on Dirty Datini. A special thanks to our guest, Terrinee Gundy, for sharing her story and her lessons that she's learned through life. I was touched by it, and I'm sure it will do the same for you. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and leave a review. For all the behind-the-scenes actions and updates, make sure to follow Dirty Datini on all the socials. Stay tuned for more upcoming episodes where I continue to stir up intriguing, insightful discussions. Until next time. Before we get back to reality, if you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode. And for that, you're iconic. But before we part ways, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, don't be shy and leave a review. Thirsty for more? Follow Dirty Datini on Instagram and TikTok at Dirty Datini. Oh, and just remember, we're on this journey together. Until next time, stay dirty and stay flirty.